the controversy surrounding the new release of the Panasonic S9 is actually very good for Panasonic, and this is a marketing professional's perspective on that reality. When I was in 6th grade, 1996, I believe, it was 96 or 95, I was part of the science club, Geek Pride. We went to Disney Epcot Center, and as part of the science club, and I remember my dad footing the bill for that. It was like $800. It was not an easy decision. And one of the things that I remember is, I really wanted to go. My dad was like, this is going to be a great opportunity in the sense of like, it's educational, it's science club, it's Disney, but $800 is a lot of money. Wasn't sure if we could afford it, but Dad did it anyway. And he gave me a couple $100 to also take with me. And so I went to Disney. And we went to water park, we went to Disneyland, or Disney World, whatever Florida is. We went to Epcot. While there, it's like, oh man, this is amazing. I need a camera. Now, I remember spending about $5 to $7 per disposable camera. I think it had like maybe 20 or 30 shots. And after, I don't know, I remember after like maybe 10 of them, I was like, hey, you know what? I should buy one of those cameras in which I can get a reel in it. Now, instead of spending like $5 to $7 per disposable camera, I figured let me spend $25 and I'll get the actual like camera that I could stick the film reel in. The film reel itself was like $3. Wasn't very good with money. Now, I spent almost all my money on film. And I remember I was in second to last day, and I realized I don't have any money for food. I just spent the last of my money on a roll of film, and I got no money for food. And so, and I remember sitting there, we're having lunch, and the folks that I was with. Now we're South Asian, and in South Asian culture, if you're with somebody, they don't go hungry. Like that's reality. And so I was thinking that cultural value would also be harbored by white people. I was wrong. These folks have full plates of food, and they're like, here's a couple of fries. And I wasn't gonna beg. I was like, all right, so this is how it is. But I remember that was for me was like, if this is a craft or a hobby that I would be willing to go hungry for, and it is something that this is a trend that I've noticed even in my adult life. I mean, media and stuff like this is an expensive hobby, and so the fact that and at times it's like, what are you doing? Where are you spending this money? It's just like, all right, well, make sure that whatever you do next makes up for this expenditure. But when I saw the images from the pancake lanes, it looked like the footage from those disposable cameras. Now, that's a good thing and a bad thing. On a good sense, there's a sense of nostalgia that came. And for me, I was just like, hey, you know what? Like, I can see myself sporting that. Now, is it worth the amount of money they're charging for it? That's a different story. One of the things I want to kind of hit upon, I guess it's a question of what about the S9 release? For those of us who are in the space or are interested in cameras and technology, what about it has people all like either Lumix or anti-Lumix? Well, why are people upset? Why are people excited? So I think there's a number of factors that come into play. This whole, I guess, approach from a brand or a manufacturer where they invite people of, I don't want to say people of influence. What they're doing is that they are borrowing and facilitating and making it easy for themselves to borrow the attention that all of these online folks have, all of these content creators, the attention that they have. Lumix as a brand is borrowing that attention to generate awareness for not only their brand, but also this new product that's coming out. It's a competitive space, technology in generally very competitive space. And so there's got to be something new and different in terms of the way that they go about ensuring that people are talking about it, whether it's positive or negative, doesn't matter. The fact is that people are talking about a product. And I think that is something that Lumix, whomever Lumix has hired, whether it's an agency to facilitate this or it is their own marketing managers and directors that are making this happen, it is smart on their part to be able to do this. So somebody who's gone through business school, one of the cases that's seemingly prominent that we study as a case in marketing is what's it called, Range Rover. Now, Range Rover is a car company. They make SUVs, sport utility vehicles. The challenge that Range Rover one time was having at one point in time is that they were seeming irrelevant, especially in a trend and time where people wanted SUVs, but what they were looking for was an SUV like we have today, which is very prominent. People don't get an SUV because they want to go off-road. They don't get an SUV because they need a lifted vehicle that can haul and has towing capacity. No, they get an SUV because it is a nice alternative to the minivan. They need something that would allow them space, cargo space, and for them to be able to house and tow their family around, essentially. So what they needed rather, is a smooth ride, but in an SUV shape. And so this was the trend that was happening. This is back in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken, and or late 90s, early 2000s. And so Range Rover, what they did was, this is the Harvard Business Review case, where they kind of showcased that this is the whole basic practice that kind of laid down the foundation of how to borrow people's attention. If anybody's wondering, any business or brand, if you're trying to get attention out, you're trying to get people aware of what you have to offer, there's really three avenues in which you can do that. Avenue number one is you buy attention, but that's going to be limited to your budget. There's only so much attention you can buy, and the purchasing of attention lacks something really important, which is credibility. There's only so much you can say, buy my stuff, trust me, I am reliable, right? Buying attention works in reminding people of your credibility. For example, Coca-Cola, they don't say buy one, get one free because Coke is so awesome. No, they say, hey, Coke is happiness. So they're reminding you of the brand. They're reminding you of the reputation. That's where advertising comes in handy. Now, if you don't have a reputation or you've got something new in play, then you've got to build that brand. You got to build that reputation. So at that point, your advertising is going to go towards sales. And so you're going to be looking at your cost per sale and whether or not, at what point does it become not sustainable until you kind of pull it back. And that's where that's where the limitation is. So how do you get beyond that? And to do that, you have to be in a relentless pursuit of publicity. And this was something that was well established by a couple of legendary marketers, Al Ries and Jack Trout. If you're not familiar with these guys, this is a book that everybody should read, especially people in the content creation space. I'm talking about this as somebody who's worked in marketing management, in the sales and marketing management their entire career. And so these a couple of read all the books by these two authors, Al Ries and Jack Trout. Ries is spelled Ries, R-I-E-S, but it's pronounced Ries. But anyway, one of the foundational elements that they laid out is that you have to be in a relentless pursuit of publicity. You have to be in a situation where people are talking about you. You're borrowing their attention. And Panasonic and Sony. Sony kind of has been leading the pack in this trend and this approach to marketing, where they're borrowing the attention of influencers, they're borrowing the attention of content creators, they're borrowing the attention of the people who are using their products. And so Panasonic, what they want to do is they want to get more people using the product, obviously. Now, Panasonic has, I believe, a lot of the people that use Panasonic, they are in a different category than the content creator. And the reason I say this is that, at least in my observance, not just looking online, but in my observance of people who have Panasonic cameras, we're talking about going back to like the GH series, the GH4, GH5, GH5S, and beyond. We're talking about the S1H. Everybody that I know that uses these cameras are bona fide video production professionals, right? In the area of client services or house of worship type situations. They almost always gravitate towards Panasonic because Panasonic is reliable in this regard. Whereas Sony, as I see, the people that use Sony are the freelance creative, the content creator. And Canon and Sony, for the most part, are also geared towards the type of photographers. I don't know of any single photographer that uses Panasonic. Every professional photographer that I've engaged with for the work of photography either uses Canon, Sony, or Nikon, right? And so, and these are people that I have hired either for work purposes or for my own thing. They almost always come in with with Canon, Sony, or Nikon for photography. But when it comes to video, it's almost always Panasonic and then maybe Sony. And the difference between, in my observance, and this is specifically contextually geographically coming at you from Space City, aka Houston, in this area in the South, in Texas, between Houston and Dallas, even in San Antonio. It's those who are working within institution, working in house of worship type situation, or they have a production company. Panasonic tends to be the go-to. And if they are freelancers, solo operators, content creators, then Sony is that thing. And I've observed that even with myself in terms of the work that I've done. I started on Sony XD cams for my solo freelance creative work. But when it came to some of the seminar recordings and things like that, I gravitated towards Panasonic for a lot of the very specific reasons. Even right now, the work that I do for the long form stuff, for seminar recordings, for production type of setup, I have a combination between Sony and Panasonic. And so the way I see it is that Panasonic already has a very strong hold in a specific category of people, and they want to also now extend into another area. And I believe that area is underserved. I don't want to say it's an untapped market, but the type of people that would want an S9, it's not that they're looking for it is the casual creative. Now, can somebody who's professional be casual? Absolutely. I consider myself outside of the scope of work, outside of the scope of producing seminars or marketing material or sales material for work. Outside of that, I would consider myself a casual creative. I almost always, when I go out, typically I have a camera of a type with me. Now, in order for me to be able to effectively do that, and because I lean more towards video, I need a camera that would do that well. The Sony ZV-E10 is not that. It's not my casual creative camera. For me personally, I have found it to be more cumbersome in the edit to work with the footage of a ZV-E10 for travel. My Canon EOS M6 Mark II has been amazing for that. simple, straightforward, good image quality. It's got a bunch of shortcomings for sure that if I were to I got the EOS M6 Mark II to be to have a camera with me wherever I go, and that camera is going to be far greater than the cell phone that I have. And this is where the S9 I believe is positioning itself. And so and this is a key term that we need to kind of understand, is that there's that positioning factor that needs to be like, I see a lot of people, even myself, I was like, okay, well, initial impressions, this seems like a camera that would be competing with the likes of the Sony ZV-E1. And I loved the ZV-E1. I had rented it for about a month in a travel context. I believe it is the ideal camera. The only shortcoming that I can consider with the ZV-E1, it's not even the overheating. That thing ran for like 40 minutes without overheating. A battery ran out. I had started it with like less than half battery, and it was warm to the touch when I ran with it for so long. And even then, it's like in that outside of work scenario, I'm not going to be running that camera for more than like 15, maybe 20 minutes at max. And so in that scenario, the ZV-E1 was great. The only shortcoming I remember from that is that at 120 frames per second, that camera disables gyro data stabilization logging. That's how I stabilize my footage. I use either Catalyst Browse or Gyro Flow. I don't use the IBIS or the active steady shot, whatever the thing that Sony has going on. Active dynamic stabilization. I'm not. It's great in a pinch, and with the sensor readout speed that the ZV-E1 has, it's excellent. That's one of the downsides of the ZV-E1, is whenever I wanted to use the stabilization, the digital stabilization in that, because of the rolling shutter and the jello effect, it just wasn't working out for me. It was kind of like the same thing with the A7C, and I would assume it would be a similar scenario with the A7C II, unless you're using it in cropped mode. So in reality, the A7C and A7C II are cropped mode cameras. And they're also kind of like competing similarly, I would think, in the same space as the S9. But I just feel like the outside of the ZV-E1, A7C, A7C II, ZV-E10, these are seemingly more geared towards people who want to take photos. And so, whereas the ZV-E1 is more towards, more towards video. Panasonic S9 feels like, it's the impression that I've gotten from a lot of the people that have created content, is it's kind of like a good bridge between the two. The thing that's got me really interested in it are a couple of features that none of the other manufacturers and brands have in their cameras. The number one thing that really stood out to me is, interestingly, not even like the LUT thing is cool, right? But it's not that big. Like even with the ZV-E1, you can load, and Panasonic S5 II and S5 IIX, you can load a LUT to bake into your footage, which is great for travel situation. And so that's something that I could do beforehand. And so that's not a big deal. I think just if you want to play around with things. And I remember back when I got my first camcorders, they had like these picture profiles like sepia and black and white and night vision and things like that. They were fun to play with. I would assume it's a little bit more sophisticated and better thought out than that. But so that's cool. It saves time, because when I'm traveling, if I can have a log profile but with a LUT already baked in, I really like that about the ZV-E1. And the fact that Panasonic now has that too, that's amazing. And so, but that's not the even most interesting thing. The thing that got me, I was really interested, was that hybrid zoom function. Like that was dope, right? In the sense of like with, I can't do that with Canon. With Canon, the way you do it is that you go into a crop mode and that you get your extra focal length, but it's like now you got to shoot a different clip. With Sony, you have your clear image zoom, but then with clear image zoom, it's either or, but it doesn't do it the way that Panasonic did it, which is smart, where it does it at the same time, especially if you're in video mode. Because if you're shooting 4K or 6K, 4K footage is in truth, in terms of megapixel count, about 8 megapixels. So if you're starting from a 24 megapixel or 26 megapixel image, you have a lot of digital space to kind of zoom in on or crop in on. And so if you have a zoom lens and you combine it with the digital crop with the hybrid zoom, makes it in tandem. It works together. And so therefore, whatever zoom that you have is now working, is essentially extending that zoom by 1.5x. And so that to me, I was just like, yo, this is dope. This actually makes it even better as an ideal camera. So if I'm, if I'm traveling, I'm visiting family, whatever, right? And I have a 24 to 105, that is going to get extended to like 150, right? Or more, if I change my resolution. And personally, I do find myself more and more jumping into a 1080p crop mode in other cameras like Magic Lantern EOS M, as well as the 5D Mark III, to get the extra reach. And then because I have a good bit rate in terms of the density of the file, when I render and process it, you can never tell, except if you do a side-by-side comparison in pixel peep, that it was shot in 1080p versus 4K. That's YouTube compression for you. And so these are some of the things that, those are two of the things that really stood out to me. Now, a couple things, I guess there was an initial disappointment with the announcement that came out. It had nothing to do with the controversy. The initial disappointment was, I guess it had to do with the offering, and I can understand where they're coming at it from. So, for example, you have the S5 Mark II, which was the first one that came out. And I was like, oh, this sounds great. I believe there's another one coming. The S5 IIX came out. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. But the thing that I just didn't like, as a video shooter, I have no use for the viewfinder. And my thought would have been that S5 IIX would be perfect. As is, just remove the viewfinder. I have the same feelings about the R6 Mark II. Just remove the viewfinder. Because now I can take this as a professional thing and as a personal thing in one. Because now, without the viewfinder, that thing becomes significantly smaller. In fact, it is the perfect size without the viewfinder. Now, the S9 is that without the viewfinder, but with all of the limitations. So for somebody like myself, I don't see the S9 being the only camera that I have with me. Now, there is a way around that 10-minute or 15-minute record limit, which is the same solution. I believe it would be the same solution as the 30-minute record limit that Canon had a while back. And the solution is to use an intervalometer. For anybody who doesn't know, the intervalometer on a camera, what that does is that you can set a timer for, now if you're doing a time lapse or a motion time lapse, the intervalometer sets a timer so that after a certain time, the camera is triggered to take another photo. So if you have a 30-minute record limit on your camera, or 29 minute and 59 second, you can tell it to record again at every 30 minute and 1 second, or at every 30 minutes, right? That way you have a continuous, you have 30-minute file segments. The only downside with the M6 Mark II is that the Canon would overheat in 4K at about 45 minutes. So that intervalometer solution was, right? And so, but with the S9, if you're recording in 6K open gate and it's recording every 10 minutes, so at 10 minutes and 1 second, you set the intervalometer. My assumption is that this would be the appropriate solution to have continuous recording files in 10-minute segments. And if it overheats in like an hour, that's probably more than enough for any long-form content that you would want to do. That is my assumption. The thing, though, is that in terms of the form factor, it's like almost anybody that gets it is going to want a grip. Why not include the grip? And then that begs the question of why not just make it an S5 II with all of the LUT and Lumix lab features in it It's going to be the same thickness. Now you have a grip, and now you can insert SD card from the side. Why from the bottom? From the side. And so that's my only thing that kind of really threw me off. But I'm looking at this as a camera from the perspective of when I first got into my first interchangeable lens camera was the Canon EOS M original. And I got that camera not knowing anything, thinking that I could have interchangeable lenses, only to find out that it is a different mount. The EF-M mount is not the same as the Canon EF mount. And so this entire library of lenses that Canon has, I could not use it with the EF-M until they came out with an adapter. That adapter was $250. And for somebody who just spent $300 on a camera, now I got to spend almost that entire amount for another adapter so I could put lenses on there. That didn't make any sense to me. And so it wasn't until like 2016 that more affordable versions of that adapter started to be worked in, or 2017, something like that. And then you have Viltrox and Metabones and all these other guys. In the meantime, I remember having a kind of a buyer's remorse when I got the EOS M, and that my other friends, they had the GH3 or the GH4. I was like, oh, that camera is so much better. And it's got 4K and all that, and I've got this 1080p camera. And so I just remember having that buyer's remorse, and I was just thinking to myself, like, today, if I was in that same situation where I wanted a casual carry camera that I could put in my pocket in that same manner, the S9 looks very attractive in that regard. What I would love to see, and I know as of this recording, Panasonic is seemingly set to announce a new rumored Micro Four Thirds camera on June 5th. What I would love to see is for them to repurpose the H5S sensor, Micro Four Thirds, to give us the same, because it gives you about full frame quality up to like 12,800 or 25,600, similar seemingly indistinguishable noise and dynamic range quality between full frame and Micro Four Thirds. And so add to that the technology of dynamic range boost or whatever the GH6 has. Let's come out with a new Micro Four Thirds camera that has that same tech. I think that's going to be awesome. And here's the thing with mirrorless cameras, like the viewfinder, I get it. A lot of people still shoot like this and they want the viewfinder. Like, make it a detachable EVF that you can put into the hot shoe. And if they have that as an option that gives people like myself, I believe that will make both photographers and videographers and casual carry type folks, like, you have one system and it's modular, right? You pick the parts that you want. And so for the people who don't want the viewfinder, boom, it's like $200-300 less. You want a viewfinder, pay the extra money. And so I feel like these are some of the things that you can kind of look at. And what now, I think I want to end on this note. Maybe I should have opened with this. I remember, and this has kind of been the feedback, and a lot of the folks are that pancake lens. I think this is the biggest challenge with the S9 and Lumix in general. They have a great lens selection, and they have between both the Leica Panasonic lenses, the Sigma lenses, but they're big lenses, right? Even their primes, they're uniform. That's wonderful. But they're not pocketable or easily baggable, right? And so they don't have a lot of compact lenses. And Canon's had like a whole bunch of, I've had the 24mm EFS pancake lens and the 40mm pancake lens. Even Sony's got some small lenses. And this is the thing, like, Sony really kind of ate into Micro Four Thirds market share, I believe, because they kind of jumped in on their philosophy, because Micro Four Thirds is supposed to be like small cameras, small lenses. The Sony's like, yeah, we can do that with full frame. And so we can do that with a crop sensor. And so you see Sony cameras coming out smaller than Panasonic cameras. And so as a result, I feel like, couple that with the casual creative also needs something that Panasonic only recently provided, which is reliable, non-technical autofocus, in the sense that the point and shoot. And I feel like this is something that's lacking in the pocket camera space, right? I think the Sony ZV-E1 is the only one that has it. and the ZV-E1 Mark, not E1, Sony ZV-1, not the interchangeable one, was the pocket one, the one that with this where the lens is already attached. So that coupled with the ZV-1 Mark II, I think every other camera in that space doesn't even compare in terms of reliability of that autofocus. You turn it on and you can start recording and everything's in focus. Canon missed a huge opportunity with the G7X Mark III. I had that camera for about 6 months. I sold it. It was even if you're not going to have reliable autofocus, at least give us good manual control. That control ring in video mode was non-functional, only in photo mode, which didn't make sense to me. And so if Canon were to come out with another G7X Mark IV with the quad pixel autofocus, I'd be sold. Yes, it's a 1-inch sensor, but like it's perfect for what it is. And I feel like that's an underserved market right there. The RX1R Mark III with the 32mm, if they were to do that, but with reliable autofocus and 4K video, so basically it's because the RX1R Mark II is the same size body as the EOS M with a 32mm f2 lens on it. That thing is pocketable. And if they were to make that same camera with a Mark III, price it at $2,000, it would be worth it. And so, and that's, I think, and with that, give you reliable 4K, 10-bit, that'd be good. So all the log profiles, that'll be wonderful. Baked in LUT, I think all of the same features that the ZV-E1 has, or the A7C II has, but now it would be the A7CR sensor, but like, I guess in a smaller package. But maybe they would, I mean, thermal management is a thing, but like, who cares? Limit the videos to 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes. That's fine. But just give us good quality video options. I think you have a winner right there. I know I'm getting a little off tangent, but the thing that I want to share was with relation to the pancake lens. So Panasonic doesn't have a lot of compact lenses. They have from Sigma, Sigma has a 45mm f2.8 and a 24mm f3.5. These are relatively small lenses, but they're not pancake, right? And then you have your 26mm, the RF from Canon, a 28mm f2.8, also a Team Tang lens. So like this is L-mount needs one good 2.8 pancake lens. And if they have that, this makes the S9 perfect. And so the other thing that would also help is if somebody comes out with a focal reducer so that if you use it in crop mode, then we get good, decent autofocus to adapt old lenses from like Canon, for example. And now you get 4K 16, all that stuff, all in the same field of view. Because that's the thing what I see about like A7C and A7C II. To me, they're full frame photo cameras, but they're really a crop sensor video camera. Because for you to avoid the rolling shutter issues and all that, like 4K, and you want to have uncropped 4K 60, especially in the A7C Mark II, then you're going to need a focal reducer. And I believe Laowa from Venus Optics, for their 24mm macro probe lens, they have a focal reducer that would fit on the L mount. The question is, will that focal reducer work with other lenses? I don't know. But that 26 or 28mm, whatever the focal length is, the pancake lens that they have, the F8, it reminded me, this is what I'm going to close out with, it reminded me of the old disposable cameras from back in the 80s and 90s. That's a lens that I would want to have in my pocket, maybe a couple of them in case I trash one, just for the sake of, being able to capture moments in the same look and feel of that time, of the late 80s and 90s. And so that's the thing that it reminded me of the fact that there's a joy that comes from having something like this, even though it's expensive, relatively speaking. And this brings me to my final thought, is the cost. The cost is this camera worth $1,500? Well, there's a principle in marketing and advertising and designing your offer. You can always start high and come down. It's very difficult to start low and go up. And so I think it's smart on Panasonic's end for them to start with a $1,500 price range. I wouldn't buy it at $1,500, but it's smart for them to start at $1,500. For sure, probably within the year, you will see these on the used market for about $1,000. The R8, you can get that. You can grab that for $1,200 or less on eBay if you're patient. The A7C, I've seen listings that get grabbed up for just over $900. So, and that's the thing with an entry-level full-frame camera that does a decent video. I believe it should be priced at just under $1,000. $900, I believe, is the sweet spot in terms of value. And so, if you're buying used, and I'm all for buying camera gear used, and that pancake lens, less than $100, hands down. I would not pay more than $100 for that pancake. I would maybe $50. I would aim for $50. So if you give me $1,000 Lumix or $900 Lumix S9 with a $50 pancake lens that is the f8, I'm down. I'm game.